In 2006, new motorcycle sales in the United States crossed 1.1 million units, the highest figure the modern industry has ever recorded. By 2025, that number had fallen to roughly 486,500. According to the Motorcycle Industry Council, the median age of a motorcycle owner in the United States was 32 back in 1990. By the late 2010s, it had reached about 50, and recent industry analysis suggests it has stayed there or climbed higher. An 18-year jump in just over 3 decades, and the number is still climbing. So why did the youngest, most adventurous hobby in America turn into one of the oldest? If you asked anyone in a motorcycle dealership showroom back in 2005 about the future of riding in the United States, they would have told you the sport was booming. New riders were flooding in, Harley-Davidson was printing money, and the upgrade path from a Ninja 250 to a leader bike felt as natural as going from a learner's permit to a driver's license. They had no idea what was coming. The Motorcycle Industry Council's latest data paints a picture that should alarm anyone who loves two wheels. New motorcycle and scooter sales in the United States hit 486,000 units in 2025, a decline of 7.6% from the year before, which was already down 4.5% from the year before that. Touring bikes fell 13%, cruisers dropped 6%. The only segments showing growth were small displacement sport bikes and beginner-friendly adventure bikes under 750 cubic centimeters. Translation: new riders are still walking through the door. Many of them just are not staying long enough to age into the core market. The ownership numbers tell the same story from a different angle. In 1990, riders aged 18 to 24 made up 16% of motorcycle owners in America. Today, that number is 6%. Riders under 18 dropped from 8% to 2%. Meanwhile, according to M1C data, first-time motorcycle buyers have hovered around 22% of new purchases since 2001. If those new riders were actually sticking around, that consistent inflow would push the average age down over time. Instead, it keeps climbing. The pipeline is filling, and it is draining out the bottom even faster. What comes next is the part that almost nobody in the motorcycle world wants to talk about, because it is not about crashes or angry spouses or the price of premium gas. It is about your brain. In 1971, two psychologists named Brickman and Campbell published research on something called hedonic adaptation. Their discovery was brutally simple. Your brain has a happiness baseline, and no matter what happens to you, good or bad, you tend to drift back toward it. They followed up in 1978 with a famous study that compared lottery winners to people who had been paralyzed in accidents. The lottery winners were no happier than ordinary controls, and actually reported getting less pleasure from everyday activities. The accident victims were less happy than controls, but not nearly as miserable as you would predict, and they rated their expected future happiness about the same as everyone else. The researchers argued this was evidence that humans adapt psychologically to extreme circumstances far more than we expect. Now think about that in the context of buying your first motorcycle. The first ride is pure electricity. The first month is a fever dream of YouTube tutorials and weekend canyon runs and sending photos to your group chat. Your nervous system is dumping novelty dopamine like it is free. And then, after the first few weeks or months, your brain does what brains always do. It adapts. The throttle still works the same. The roads have not changed. You have not crashed. You have not had a scare. Nothing dramatic happened at all. The magic just quietly dimmed, and now you are standing in your garage looking at a motorcycle that needs new tires, thinking about whether you actually feel like gearing up for a 30-minute ride to the same coffee shop you went to last Saturday. Decades of psychology research on self-determination, particularly by Sheldon and Elliott, has consistently found that goals and hobbies pursued to perform an aspirational identity, to become a cooler or more interesting version of yourself, are abandoned at significantly higher rates than ones driven by genuine intrinsic interest. Motorcycling in America is the single greatest aspirational identity purchase on the market. You are not buying a motorcycle. You are buying a version of yourself that rides a motorcycle, a rebel, an adventurer, someone interesting. And when the novelty fades, you are left holding a machine that was never really about the machine at all. The riders who survive past year 3 are almost always the ones who vary their riding. Commute, canyon roads, gravel roads, and the occasional track day. Psychologists Lubomirsky, Sheldon, and Schad specifically identified variety and deliberate appreciation as the 2 interventions that slow hedonic adaptation. Doing the same Sunday loop every week is the fastest way to make a motorcycle feel boring, but the industry does not tell you that. The industry sells you one bike for one purpose and hopes you will buy a different bike for a different purpose 3 years later. Which brings us to the money problem, because the traditional motorcycle upgrade path that built the entire American rider base is mathematically broken in 2026. Here is what the ladder used to look like. You would buy a Ninja 250 for $3,000 or $4,000, ride it for a season, sell it for a small loss, and move up to a 600cc middleweight. Ride that for a couple years, sell, and land on a flagship leader bike. 3 bikes over 5 to 7 years, each one a manageable step up in both skill and cost. That path made sense when a new Ninja 650 cost $6,000 and a Yamaha R1 cost $11,000. Today, a current Yamaha MT-07 starts around $8,000 before fees. A Kawasaki Ninja 650 is pushing $9,000. An Aprilia RS660 is nearly $12,000. These are middleweights priced at what flagship superbikes cost a decade ago, and the flagships themselves have gone completely vertical. A BMW R1300 GS adventure bike starts around $19,400. A Ducati Panigale V4 starts above $25,000. Harley-Davidson's CVO touring lineup sits between $39,000 and $55,000. Industry reporting shows adventure bikes have been one of the fastest growing segments in motorcycling over the past several years, but the growth is heavily concentrated in smaller, more approachable models under 600cc. Riders are staying small. They are not upgrading because the next rung of the ladder costs twice what it used to, so you end up with 2 populations: riders who buy a beginner bike, plateau, get bored, and cannot justify the cost to move up, and riders who skip the ladder entirely, buy a leader bike on day 1, and end up overwhelmed, scared, or injured. Neither group sticks around for long. This would be manageable if new riders had realistic expectations about what owning a motorcycle actually looks like day to day. They do not, and it is partly the fault of everyone making motorcycle content, including channels like this one. As iMotorbike noted in a February 2026 article titled "From Likes to Risk," a behavior some now call content riding has emerged. Riders choose their routes, their speeds, and even their maneuvers based on what looks good on camera rather than what is safe or practical. CSM research finds that social media feedback, particularly from Instagram and TikTok, is increasingly influencing design decisions for new motorcycles. Matte finishes, neon accents, cafe racer customization, and limited edition colorways are all responses to that pressure. Manufacturers know bikes need to look good in a square crop before they need to handle well in a corner. The problem is not that motorcycle content exists. The problem is that new riders compare their reality to a curated highlight reel. Your actual riding experience can involve heavy traffic on a 4-lane highway, sweating through a mesh jacket in August, and parallel parking between a dumpster and a Hyundai Tucson. The content you watch features drone shots over mountain passes, perfectly timed wheelies, and zero traffic in either direction. That gap between expectation and reality is enormous. When you cannot close it, the bike starts to feel like a broken promise instead of a source of joy. If you want to know what the motorcycle world looks like when that gap does not exist, you have to leave the United States entirely. Pew Research Center's 2014 Global Attitude Survey found that 87% of households in Thailand own a motorcycle or scooter. In Vietnam, that number is 86%, with roughly 65 million registered bikes for a population of about 100 million people. Indonesia sits at 85%. Even in a wealthy European country like Italy, 26% of households own a motorcycle or scooter. According to ISFORT transport data, 4.3% of all motorized trips in Italy happen on 2 wheels, mostly short urban commutes. The United States is 14%, far below every other major motorcycling nation on Earth. The difference is not culture, It is function. In Hanoi, a Honda Wave costs $1,500 and it is how your entire family gets to work and school. In Rome, a Vespa can make dense urban travel and parking dramatically easier than a car. In both countries, the motorcycle does a job. It saves time, it saves money. It is not a lifestyle accessory or an identity statement, it is a fixture. When something is woven into the fabric of daily life, the question of whether to keep riding never even comes up. In America, a motorcycle is almost always purchased in addition to a car, not instead of one. It is a second vehicle, a hobby, a project, and a hobby can be quit, a commute cannot. That single distinction explains more about rider retention than every other factor combined. Some of you might be thinking you get the adaptation, the pricing, the expectation gap, but what about the riders who buy a motorcycle and make it their entire personality, the ones who go all in? Those riders often quit the fastest. Forums and blogs are filled with posts from riders who went deep, custom paint, matching gear head to toe, long-distance rally registrations, garage posters, club patches, the works. Ken Condon, writing for Riding in the Zone, framed it this way: deciding to sell a bike you are proud to own requires you to rethink your identity and sense of individuality. That is not just losing a vehicle, that is an existential crisis with two wheels. The riders who wrap their entire sense of self around motorcycling burn out faster than the ones who keep it as one thread among many. Why? Because hedonic adaptation hits hardest where there is no diversification. If motorcycles are the only interesting thing in your life, the day they stop being interesting leaves you with nothing. The 40-year riders almost always have other hobbies, other interests, and other things they care about. The motorcycle fits naturally into a full life, rather than trying to be the full life. On top of all the psychological and economic forces working against new riders, there is a collection of practical barriers that almost nobody discusses, and they are quietly killing rider retention from the ground level. The 2024 Pied Piper Internet Lead Effectiveness Study, covered by RevZilla's Common Tread, found that 43% of powersports dealers in the United States do not send a personalized response when a potential customer reaches out online. 30% do not respond at all. Only 14% respond quickly and thoroughly through more than one channel. Adventure Rider documented cases where dealership staff could not name the displacement of bikes on their own showroom floor, and a Honda dealer charged $129 for a $60 battery replacement. The front door of the hobby is being slammed in people's faces by the very businesses that should be holding it open. Then there is gear. A basic entry-level setup of helmet, jacket, gloves, pants, and boots runs anywhere from $800 to $1,500. Go with premium brands like Shui and Dainese, and you are looking at $2,500 to $4,000 before you have twisted a throttle. That is a 20 to 30% surcharge on top of a beginner motorcycle that nobody mentions at the point of sale. And once you realize you need a summer set, a rain set, and a cold weather set, you are buying gear 3 times over. The cost of entry is real. Insurance is its own nightmare. The average motorcycle insurance premium in America is roughly $519 a year, which sounds fine until you are a 22-year-old with a clean record trying to insure a 600 cubic centimeter sport bike, and your quote comes back at $1,700 to $1,900. First-year sport bike riders often report that insurance dwarfs their fuel and maintenance costs combined. Many cancel the policy after one season to save money. According to Progressive's own website, a lapse in coverage can lead to higher premiums on future policies, creating a trap where the rider decides it is not even worth reinstating. The bike sits in the garage for a few months, and then it shows up on Facebook Marketplace with the caption, "Low miles, needs nothing." Insurance drives people away. And parking? If you live in an apartment, good luck. Motorcycle Habit and Dynamoto both document the absurdity of urban motorcycle storage, where leases either prohibit it, charge second vehicle fees, or only offer exposed lot parking where theft and weather damage are constant threats. In a country where the majority of young riders rent in urban areas, the simple question of where to physically put the motorcycle is a barrier that does not exist for car owners and does not exist in Ho Chi Minh City, where you park on the sidewalk next to everyone's Honda. Parking is a deal breaker for many. Then there is the community problem. In Italy, every village has a moto club. In Southeast Asia, riders congregate on every block. In American suburbs, the 22-year-old new rider often rides completely alone. The motorcycle clubs that do exist skew heavily toward riders over 50. The American Motorcyclist Association's average member age is 48. Online communities on Reddit and Discord help, but they are not the same as showing up on a Saturday morning to a parking lot full of riders who want to see your bike and tell you about theirs. Riding alone makes quitting easier because there is no social structure pulling you back to the garage on a Saturday morning. America has built a motorcycle culture with almost no infrastructure for the new rider to find their people. All of these friction points compound on top of the single, scariest reality of motorcycle ownership. NHTSA data confirms that 6,335 motorcyclists died on American roads in 2023, the highest number ever recorded in the United States. That figure dipped slightly to 6,228 in 2024, but motorcyclists were about 27 times more likely to die per mile traveled than someone in a passenger car. Among riders aged 15 to 20, fatalities jumped 44% between 2022 and 2023, and 34% of riders killed in crashes did not even have a valid motorcycle license. A peer-reviewed study by Rawlinson and Goodman published in the Journal of Safety Research using crash and licensing records from North Carolina covering over 200,000 riders found that crash rates peak immediately after licensure and decline by roughly 42% for every doubling of riding experience. That curve keeps improving through year 3 and beyond. The riders who survive the first 12 to 18 months eventually reach a risk level much closer to driving a car. The first year carries a disproportionate share of the risk, which means the NHTSA's terrifying headline number of 27 times more dangerous is being dragged up significantly by the newest, least experienced riders on the road. Fear is real. It is rational. And the way most new riders respond to it, by gradually avoiding more and more riding situations until they are not riding at all, is perfectly understandable. What is missing is anyone telling them that the curve gets dramatically better if they push through and invest in their skills during that critical first year. So if everything is stacked against new riders, the economics, the psychology, the infrastructure, the fear, what actually separates the people who ride for 3 years from the people who ride for 30? It's simple. And it's not about the bike. The riders who last are the ones who stopped chasing the fantasy version of motorcycling and started building the real-life version into their actual lives. They ride to the grocery store on a Tuesday. They commute when the weather cooperates. They own something cheap, reliable, and easy to maintain, and they keep it for years at a time. They don't need the spec sheet. They don't need the matching gear. They don't need the Instagram post. You'll find these people in every comment section on the internet, and they're almost always riding something unglamorous. A Suzuki DR200 with a milk crate bungeed to the back. A 20-year-old Honda CB500 with scratched fairings and fresh oil, a KLR 650 that looks like it's been through a war and runs like it could survive another one. They also keep getting better. They notice when their cornering improves. They appreciate the days when the clutch feels smooth and every shift is clean. They have programmed their brains to find satisfaction in incremental progress, which is the exact psychological mechanism that fights hedonic adaptation. Variety, appreciation, progress. Those 3 words are backed by decades of behavioral research, and they are free. This is not about motorcycles dying. American motorcycle culture as a recreational identity purchase is what is dying. The riders who treat their bike as utility, as community, as a lifelong skill worth developing are the ones who will still be throwing a leg over the seat at 65. And the ones who bought a costume, they will be on Facebook Marketplace by month 14. If you want to be part of the group that is still riding a decade from now, subscribe. Next week, we are breaking down the 5 cheapest motorcycles you can actually live with long term. And if you know someone who is thinking about quitting, send them this video. It might change their mind.